What's going on, everybody? Welcome back for another episode of Around the Octagon. Good news and bad news. Bad news, Zach Tong is not here to host us today. Good news, I am. So let's get right into this with a UFC 322 recap. We'll start off with a recap, then we'll get into this weekend's card. How we doing, fellas, before we get into this?
Doing good.
Yeah, doing good.
All righty. Well, I guess there's nothing left to do but get into this recap. Let's start off with the biggest fight of the night, JDM versus Islam. Luke, I know you were watching attentively. Let's see what you got for us. What'd you think?
Yeah, what a terrible read by me. I don't know why we bet against the Dagestanis ever. It's like an automatic, especially at those odds so close. I guess maybe a little over. It was like what, it closed at like 300, so maybe not that close. But I think I was really caught up in the Craig Jones, Volkanovski experience lore of JDM, and I forgot how dominant Islam is. And he looked the size discrepancy. I know me and Zach went a little bit back and forth when we did the predictions. There was no size discrepancy. They looked the same. And everything that JDM did really well in the Belal fight, the scrambles, the ability to get taken down and then get back up and keep at range, Islam was so prepared for all of that. I mean, I know we talked about potentially if Islam did lose this, it would make the Ilia fight. Now Ilia's playing chase again. He's got to go up to 170 because Islam's got, we'll get into it further down this card, but he's got a long line of guys who want to fight him, and I don't see him losing the belt anytime soon.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. And to be completely honest, not like the most exciting fight by any means. It was, like you said, pure domination by Islam. I had one too many beers and ended up passing out around like halfway through round 2, and I woke up at the end of round 5, and they were in the exact same position that I went to sleep when I went to sleep in round 5. So 15, 16 minutes later is the exact same thing. And I kind of knew at that point there was no question about who had won. And credit to Islam, double champ. Him and DC were getting into it with Khabib a little bit, busting his balls, talking about everything tastes better when you're the double champ. And he goes, some people just don't know, and they're making fun of Khabib. So that was pretty cool. What a special moment for the Dagestanis. And yeah, like you said, Luke, there's a long list of guys now at every welterweight between that's ranked in the top 5 or top 6 had a fight booked on that card. And then we have another big welterweight matchup coming up in Belal Muhammad and Ian Garry on this one. So, like you said, no shortage of opponents for Islam. But who knows, man? If you want to do absolute numbers for your first fight on Paramount with that company, you push Ilia up to 170 and just have him go at it. First triple fight or first 3 title fight contender or whatever in UFC history. So definitely some interest there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It would definitely be, fight of the century type of deal for the UFC. I think that Ilia Islam fight. I do have a tough time seeing Ilia come up to 170 though. I mean, he's so short. I think that's such like a big disadvantage for him. He can only bulk up so much until he's at like a significant height and size disadvantage there. But yeah, I was right there with you, Ryan. Actually, we were talking about it earlier. I stopped watching the fight after the 3rd round. Obviously, I had quite a bit of coin on JDM. And so after that 3rd round, I saw, it was just kind of scramble on the ground, maybe get up. JDM gets a few punches in, then he's back on the ground. I was kind of sick of that from the Shevchenko Zhang Weili fight, which we will be getting into now. Speaking of that, I think all of us were on Zhang, or was it only, yeah. So again, us 3 again are in punishment. And UFC held these last 2 fights. Both of our fighters just kind of getting held down and, getting beat up on by the other fighter. I did think it was very uncharacteristic of Shevchenko to kind of just lay on Zhang Weili the whole time. And it was almost, and that's kind of where I start having a little bit of an issue with the wrestling aspect in UFC is when you're avoiding the striking and just going for the grappling and kind of holding somebody down. That does get super frustrating to watch. I mean, we had it kind of back to back. Islam did a little bit more than Shevchenko. But Ryan, what were your thoughts on that fight? How do you think that played out? Were you, kind of disappointed as I am, or what's going on?
I guess I wouldn't say I had Zhang, so I mean a little disappointed, more so surprised, and just the pretty much what seemed like an effortless, display by Shevchenko to get Zhang Weili to the ground and control her. It didn't even look like for some of those takedown attempts she was really trying. She would kind of just, like bear hug her and then fall over top of her. and the size discrepancy and the strength discrepancy was what really shocked me the most there. Like, it seemed like there was just absolutely nothing Zhang Weili could do besides, when they danced around the feet at the beginning of each round. You can see a little bit of a speed discrepancy, but, Valentina held her own, got a couple of punches on the feet of her own, and then right back to the ground again every single round, just pure domination. And yeah, like I said, people were saying they make weight classes for a reason, but obviously I guess that goes both ways considering Islam won his. So just a fight kind of really stunk up what was beginning to be a looking like a fantastic main card between the both of them. But it's pretty much all I have to say on it.
Yeah, right. I like that you touched on the going up in weight and the size. We talked about it. I mentioned it with Islam. He looked the size, all part of 170, looked big in there. And I didn't think Weili, I didn't think it was a good jump up. Shevchenko looked way bigger than her. And I know, props to Zach. I know he's not on, but I do want to give him credit. We went back and forth. I mentioned that I saw more avenues for success for Weili, and I think I was completely off on that too. Shevchenko looked great on the ground. Obviously, we knew she had the striking advantage, but she didn't even need it. She was able to take her down, control her, and what we've seen Weili do so well in the lower weight classes, get up from those, and even be able to scramble in the ground and get in the offensive position on the ground. And Shevchenko had all the answers. Props to Weili, though. I still want to give her credit for going up weight class. I think that's, it's a hard thing to do, especially in the women's divisions. We don't see it as much. I know we saw it a little bit in the earlier days with, the Amanda Nunes. But other than that, I would like to see how Weili bounces back going back down. I think she relinquished. Yeah, you got to relinquish the belt nowadays in the UFC. So I'm looking forward to seeing her bounce back and hopefully getting that belt back.
Oh yeah, that was the one other thing I wanted to touch on. I do have to check this real quick just to make sure, but I could have swore when I checked the rankings today, Tatiana Suarez was ranked number 1 in that division, and Zhang Weili was ranked 2. She moved down 2 notches, which honestly surprised the fuck out of me because Zhang Weili dominated Tatiana Suarez when they fought in her last fight. So pretty surprising out of the UFC rankings. I just didn't get that one.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of rankings, that does remind me. There has to be some sort of weird thing going on with those rankings because I saw all over MMA Twitter, there was the Kai Kara France dropped off the rankings for whatever reason. He's just not on the UFC rankings anymore. So just hoping that's not something serious where he's leaving the league or something like that. But yeah, I getting back to this fight, I do think I like that you guys both touched on the size difference. I mean, as soon as we turned on the fight and as soon as both of them got in that octagon, it seemed like there was just, a woman's double the size of Zhang Weili in there. So it was really surprising. I mean, and that was pretty obviously, the cause of what happened and all the things that happened in that fight, just being able to hold her down. She was just so much bigger, which was kind of crazy to see. So it makes sense, and it kind of is just more props to Amanda Nunes, like you mentioned, Luke, how great you have to be to really move up in those women's division, because a little bit of weight goes a long way. But, getting away now from the boring fights, so we say, we got Sean Brady versus Michael Morales. Probably, I think, me and Ryan, I think we were both on Sean Brady.
Yeah.
But, Luke, you did have Michael Morales, which surprised the hell out of me this weekend. I was not expecting that fight to go the way that it did. So I'll let you kick this one off with your thoughts.
Yeah, so after we filmed the pod earlier in the week, I was talking to a bunch of my buddies. We had some people over leading up to the fights, and everyone I talked to was on Sean Brady. No one was on Michael Morales. So I was actually hanging out with one of our friends from Philadelphia, and he was talking about Sean Brady, obviously a big name out of Philadelphia. And I was second guessing. I know, Son, you sent a text. I sent a little joke back that there's no chance, but I was nervous going into this one. Obviously, a lot of respect to Sean Brady. He is a dog. We touched on this in the podcast before, that he didn't need to take this fight, a guy lower in the rankings, and props to him for doing that. But I think very similar to kind of the tone of this podcast, the size discrepancy, Michael Morales looked freaking huge in there. And I think the size, I think it caught Sean Brady a little bit off guard. In the early part of the first round, he was able to, stay away and not get really in any grappling exchanges or any clinches. Sean Brady had no opportunities for that. And eventually, if that fight was going to stay that way, Michael Morales was going to find the chin, and that's what happened. props to Michael Morales, man. I know he's calling for the belt now. I also saw, we'll get to it, but Prates called him out, and Michael Morales said that would be like the semifinal. That would be a great fight, but I think the world, it's at the palm of Michael Morales' hands right now. He's feeling good. He's still super young too. So I'm excited to see what he could do in his upcoming fights.
Yeah, Luke, I mean, I agree with you 100%. It was surprising for me because I just figured that when that fight started, I thought Sean Brady wouldn't have even given Michael Morales a chance to have like a feeling out process on the feet. And I think eventually when he did decide to shoot his one takedown, he had already been rocked a little bit. And I think at that point, it was just a case of, too little, too late. I was fully expecting Sean Brady to go out there and just immediately, try to push him up against the fence and just working a takedown off the cage, and just start implementing that grappling right away. Because like we know how much of a threat Michael Morales is on the feet, but I mean he didn't. He chose to stand and bang in the center of the octagon for about a minute, and he paid the price for it. He got rocked there, pushed back, had like a little like panic takedown attempt. Michael Morales was able to shuck it off. Then the rest is history. Finally caught him, and then that's it. And then in terms of what Michael Morales does now, I guess it's kind of up in the air. I know at the press conference, Dana White said that would be the title fight, like eliminator, but it was also a pretty like haphazardous yes. He was like, the reporter was like, "Is this title fight eliminator?" And Dana kind of put the mic down and picked it back up and just went like, "Yeah," and then put the mic down again. So not really like a full confirmation on that end. But I would love to see that. I would love to see Prates. But I think if you stick to the word and you're not going to do the Ilia fight with Islam, I guess Michael Morales has to be the next guy in line because I know Belal won't fight him. They're training partners. So I guess maybe Ian Garry. But
yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the rankings right now, and we have an inactive Shavkat, obviously dealing with injuries and everything else outside of that. Prates right under him. And then, at number 3, we got Michael Morales right below Belal and JDM. So obviously JDM just lost. So I could fully see Michael Morales getting this next title shot. But if not, there is a challenger, which was a spectacular performance that I honestly didn't even expect that outcome of that fight. I thought it would go by decision, but we had Leon Edwards versus Carlos Prates. Brian, you want to give us your thoughts?
Yeah, so I was on Carlos Prates, and I'm not gonna lie, I got pretty scared during the first round because I was like, "Oh shit, he's just gonna take the Ian Garry route." And for in that first round, I was like, "Wow, I think Leon Edwards is gonna get this one done if he just continues this game plan." But credit to Carlos Prates, he made some adjustments. He started staying on the outside. Just lunging knees into the body, attacking the body on the outside, staying at range, and I think someone referred to him as the welterweight Pereira, which is at this point true. He touched him once with like a straight left, down the pipe and knocked Leon off his feet. It was insane. He knocked him off his feet. One more to follow it up, and Leon's out of there. But credit to Leon. He was looking very good in the first round. Implemented that same Ian Garry style game plan very well, which does raise some concerns because for a guy like Islam, it's going to be that. But I believe if he gets Prates to the ground, Prates is staying there. It'll be cool to see how he deals with that if they ever do fight for the strap. But like again, what's the phrase? The world's the oyster for. That's definitely not it. But for Carlos Prates, you know what I'm trying to say. Like the sky's the limit. Sky's the limit for Carlos Prates. He's been calling for some fun fights, which I respect. It's not really just going straight for the belt yet. He did a little wrap around the waist thing, but I would love to see a Carlos Prates, Michael Morales fight at some point in the near future, or even run back the Ian Garry fight. Had him in some difficult spots in round 5, and I think he's made the necessary improvements to get that one back for a rematch.
Yeah, Ryan, I agree with everything you said, and I also agree with that. I think Prates Ian Garry would be a fun rematch. I can't remember exactly, but one of those guys took it on short notice, so I think it adds to it that, hey, short notice, let's do a full camp, let's see who comes out. And with the moments that he had in the 5th round, that would be a great next fight. But getting back to this fight, I mean, just a spectacular performance. We were all on him. Obviously, Son, you're a huge Fighting Nerds fan. And I wanted to bring something up that I think we talked about. Maybe it was the end of last year. We did our predictions for like who may win the belt out of the Fighting Nerds. And I think we were all over the place. Everyone had someone else. And I kind of feel like Carlos Prates kind of went under the radar when we had that. I think we were talking a lot about Caio. We were talking a lot about Gene Silva. And Prates is the guy out of that gym right now. I mean, his performances the last two have been outstanding. And even that Ian Garry fight, I mean, he proved that he could go 5 rounds, and everyone was like, oh, this guy smokes and drinks and parties all the time. There's no way he could go 5 rounds. And he did, and he was, at the end of the fight, he was the one that was in control in the 5th round. Obviously didn't get his hand raised, but just an outstanding performance. Props again to Zach. He called that Leon would be wrestling. Leon wrestled, and Prates showed that it doesn't matter. He could get up. At the end of the first, when he was getting punched in the face when Leon had the backpack, that's a meme. The dude just is like, he's aura farming at this point. I feel like every video I'm on Instagram, every time I'm on Reels, there's a Carlos Prates edit. And I love it, man. He's got everything that you need for a guy to be ahead of a promotion, or not the head, but a superstar in the promotion. I'm excited to see what he does next. I really like that Michael Morales fight because I both think they're electric fighters, similar styles. One of them's not coming out of there conscious. So that's the fight I'm looking forward to. But let's say something happens with Michael Morales. I would not be upset if they gave the nod to Prates as the 5th ranked fighter in this division to fight Islam and just keep on riding that high that he's on, and all the the fandom that he has been gaining. I don't see him coming out with the victory in that, like you touched on, Ryan. I think Islam's just on another level with the grappling, especially for Prates, who hasn't seen a really grappling heavy guy yet. But that would be a fun fight. I'm down with either of those.
Yeah, I was just about to ask, I mean, what do you guys think is next for him? But, if Michael Morales does go up for that title fight next, which it kind of looks like schedule-wise, because, you have 1, 2, 3 is JDM, Belal, Michael Morales, and then you have Carlos Prates a little bit under that. If Michael Morales goes for that title fight, Belal and Ian Garry are fighting. So I think just timing-wise, the one that makes the most sense would be Carlos, especially since the title fight just happened on the same card, so they're both going to have the same amount of time to recover. It does make sense. Plus, it's Carlos kind of called Islam out a little bit. He was like, "Hey, I'm an easy fight for you. You should take me." Almost a reverse psychology thing I saw. I think it was Instagram or Twitter. So maybe he has something up his sleeve. I would love to see him somehow beat Islam. Do I think that's going to happen? Probably not, but it would be an interesting fight.
I think there's just one more name we're forgetting at this top 5 spot. And that's Kamaru Usman.
Yeah, he dropped down. He's down to 8 now, below Sean Brady's down to 7.
Honestly, I wouldn't mind if they threw like an Islam Usman title fight. I mean, that might just be me. The guy I think's earned it. He has like either tied or has the most welterweight title defenses in UFC history. Had a stunning performance against Joaquin Buckley in his last fight, which everyone, including myself, wrote him off on. And I just figure, like, why not throw him in the mix again? I think he, if not fighting for the belt, fighting up one of those number 3 ranked, number 2 ranked guys.
Yeah, that you bring up an interesting point. I mean, it would be a good title eliminator for Carlos Prates and Usman to fight. I think because if Carlos proves that he can survive Usman's wrestling, then that really earns him that spot to go fight Islam. And if not, then Usman's the guy to go take on that wrestling because he's got that expertise. But let's not spend too well, unless you guys have anything.
Yeah, I obviously we're kind of going down the list and saying everyone that he could fight in the top 10. But I don't know the timeline of Shavkat. I would not be upset if Shavkat came back in 4 months or 2 months, whenever Prates wants to fight again, and they line that up. I think that's a great matchup for him. And if he could, same thing with Usman, if he could survive the onslaught for the takedowns and the submission attempts, them standing together would be a great battle. And I think he definitely holds the upper hand in striking, and Shavkat's no slouch in the striking department too.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I don't know when he's back. That's the thing. Yeah. I'm afraid, and I've seen people talk about it, I'm afraid we're going to have one of those what if situations with Shavkat. Yeah. Just with injuries and every personal issue that's going on outside. So I would hate for that to happen because he's obviously a specimen, and he's really the guy that kind of, kicked off the whole welterweight division being full of demons thing. He was really like the boogeyman back in the day, or I say back in the day, a year or two ago. So, but yeah, let's move on here. The last fight of the main card, we had Beneil Dariush versus Benoit Saint Denis. Ryan, I think all four of us were on BSD. Did we expect that first round finish or what?
I mean, not like that. That was that was wild. And 16 seconds is all it took for BSD to get Beneil Dariush out of there, and right off a little short like shovel left hook in the clinch, no less, with a pretty nasty follow-up shot. I was like disagreeing heavily. I think Joe Rogan was the one commentating saying I think that was a bit of an early stoppage, and then they played it in slow motion, and like Belal was flat on, not Beneil was flat on his face, completely unconscious, and had that continue, you would have just taken so much more unnecessary damage. I also credit to BSD for stepping off of him. But dude, like, guy has some serious power. I guess there is like a point to make, is the last time Beneil lost by KO, it was to Tsarukyan, and it was in a pretty similar fashion. It was like within 30 seconds of the first round starting, and just one little small left hook caught him on the chin and put him out. So it's like the argument that this guy just needs to warm up in the first round, to be able to take punishment. But credit to Benoit Saint Denis. I think the lightweight boogeyman's fully back, and I don't know what he does next. I'm sure he's looking up the rankings. I just don't know. Maybe a Paddy Pimblett fight if he wants to go down, but sky's the limit for him as well.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I think we all kind of knew that this was going to end. I thought at least that it was going to end by knockout. Dariush been around for a while, has a lot of great fights, like you said, hasn't been knocked out in a couple of fights. But also, I feel like every fight he does get rocked, and I kind of had a feeling this was coming. And props to BSD. I mean, getting it done super early, not taking any damage, allowing him to fight again. I don't know, not this year, but early next year, maybe the first fight on the Paramount. First main card when the Paramount deal kicks in. But like you guys touched on, I mean, he is definitely the boogeyman of this division. He jumps 5 spots now to 8. And I think that Paddy Pimblett call out is great, Ryan. I mean, I don't want to see, obviously, Dan Hooker's booked, Gaethje. I don't want to see him fight Holloway. And that's all fighting up, but I think he deserves it. I mean, you're on a 3-fight winning streak. You got the Roofy fight, which I probably wrote him off after the Moicano fight. He gets that one done. He gets Dariush out of there. He's playing into a role right now that I think we haven't seen in a while for a guy to come in and then lose a couple and then win a couple and get back. I mean, kind of a Dan Hooker arc. But I'm excited to see what they give BSD next. I think that, he's fine-tuning his game so well right now in his career that he has an avenue to victory against really anyone in this division. And I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I want to ask you guys a question here because, BSD's really young. I mean, he's 29, 30, and he's obviously taken some losses, but really only to the best of the division. Do you guys think that there's a chance for a BSD title run?
I think it already started. Yeah. And he's
I definitely agree. I think also the UFC's showing that they believe that too, jumping him 5 spots. I mean, he jumped Fiziev, that's a guy who's been kind of the boogeyman too. Can't beat the top guys, but always beating the guys below him. So I think he's live to, get up, maybe fight 4 or 5, and be right in that conversation come this time 6 months.
Yeah, especially if it's like a Gaethje fight, considering he's pretty much on his way to retirement. Gaethje's already said, it's 1 or 2 more for me and I'm done. So he gets really lucky if he gets that passing of the guard fight, so to speak, and he's able to actually get that one out of there. Immediately propels you up to 4, and you're just right there outside for the title shot. So
yeah, Sorry. No, you're good. I was just saying I'd hate to see it, but and see what happens in the case that he wins. But I wouldn't hate a Charles Oliveira BSD fight. I think that is fair. I mean, Charles obviously had a really good last performance, but that was against Gamrot, who I think's below BSD in the rankings now, or just above him. So I think that's an interesting fight as well. I would hate to see Charles lose, but I think some things are necessary to keep the division moving.
It's so hard to call, right? Because when you say that fight out loud, it's like my brain just immediately looks at the BSD Moicano fight, and I'm like, yeah, there's not a doubt of a shadow in my mind that Charles would win that like at any given time, just because. But then again, I don't know too much about what Benoit might have been dealing with going into that one, because he just looks so good ever since that fight, and Moicano, absolute belt to ass in that one. But
yeah,
off night for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's enough for that fight. If you guys are done, we will move on to a few of the prelims. We got 2 of them for you, starting off with Nickal versus Rodolfo Vieira. I will say before you guys get into it, I was wrong. I mean, I bet against Bo Nickal because I didn't see any, evolution in his game in the octagon. His last few fights, he was just spamming those overhands, go for that double leg. And that just did not happen this fight. I mean, we really saw that striking advance that we were looking for in his last fight against RDR. So, what do you make of that, Luke? How do you rate that performance? I was pretty much astounded by that head kick KO. I think that's the last way he would ever knock anybody out, but I think he was really showing his fluidity out there. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, great point there. I think overall it was just exactly the performance that Bo Nickal needed at this point in his career. I mean, he had the 2 takedowns early. The one of them, I think he kind of tossed him and had him in a good spot. I thought that was all right. Now, and I think he kind of chased him to the corner and was hitting him with like the overheads. And I was like, wow, he's going to get him out of here. And he ended up not getting him out. And then we were able to see him not defend the takedowns, and the guy, obviously his opponent, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu specialist, but he was able to defend the takedowns. I think his opponent went 0 for 6 on takedowns, which we could expect. But I think in the second and third round, his striking really showed the growth. And like you said, I don't think anyone expected that knockout, especially by head kick. And I think we're just starting to see that Bo Nickal's starting to figure it out. I think Ryan touched on this on the pod before. It's a lot easier to fight once you have that one in the loss column. The pressure is a little bit off of you. And I think this is just a perfect bounce back performance for Bo Nickal. He had don't like to give him props because sometimes he can be a little corny on social media, but he said, hate me or love me, you watched. And I felt that. I mean, we all did watch. I know guys are very against Bo Nickal. Some people are huge fans. I thought it was just an all-time performance for him at this point in his career, and really propels him and gives him the confidence going forward. I don't know if they give him a ranked opponent next, but I think we're definitely back in that conversation for Bo Nickal.
Oh, yeah. That was pure domination. And if he's not fighting the number 15th ranked, he's probably fighting just outside of it. But very, very impressive performance, pure, like I said, pure and utter domination. At one point, like you said, Luke, had that one takedown, had a pretty nasty submission locked up at one point for a few seconds. And he thought the fight was over there, pushes it in, gets some pretty nasty ground. But I thought the fight was there. And then he just goes out in the third round and has one of the most impressive head kicks that we've seen this year for a KO. And in terms of corniness, frick you, mother frickers, wasn't the greatest, post-octagon interview. But other than that, that's the exact type of win you need after having a loss like that to RDR. And I'm very happy for Bo. He came back 100% fully, looked even better than he has in any one of his fights where he has gotten wins. So sky's the limit again for Bo Nickal.
Yeah, I mean, I really think he, just to kind of put the cherry on top, I really think he came out of his cocoon this weekend. We saw him take the time that he needed after that RDR fight. Take the little bit of that activity off and really focus on his training and seeing how good he can really get. And we definitely saw that this weekend. So I'm pretty sure I can speak for all of us on that we're excited to see what's next. But Ryan, I would like you to kick us off with the elephant in the room fight that I think was the biggest underdog, I think, of the weekend. Wellmaker versus the new bad guy, Ethyn Ewing. What'd you make of that?
Yeah, it reminded me of Diego Lopez versus Movsar Evloev. Honestly, that is like the first comparison I saw. Obviously, Diego Lopez wasn't able to get that one done, but I mean, this Ethyn Ewing guy, I still don't know too much about him, but very, very impressive. Stood in the pocket with a power puncher and was just, dishing him out mean, threw a lot of nasty elbows, was just controlling the pace of that fight the entire time, which is especially something that's shocking considering he took this fight on like 4 or 5 days notice. Just in the center of the octagon the entire time, was willing to take one, to give one, and just looked like he hit harder, which is very impressive again when you're fighting a guy like Wellmaker. I mean, I'm interested to see this guy fight. Shame it went 15 full minutes. I'm sure he took a little bit of damage in there, but I want this guy back in the octagon immediately. Loved him. He had a pretty electric interview. He said, I'm going to butcher the quote. It's like he hit him with the, like, he who holds the sword in calm hands it's something like that. I thought that was tough as hell too, but good for him. In terms of what we do with Malcolm Wellmaker now, no idea. It might just be, luck of the draw where you just get one of these like freaks, like a Diego Lopez coming off the regional scene who's just about to make an absolute tear. And I don't know if he's a featherweight or a bantamweight, but a tear in this division. We'll see, man. That shocked the hell out of me. Might have been a Vegas trap, but besides the point, very impressive win for Ethyn Ewing.
Yeah, right. I think you also said it on Friday or on Saturday when we were watching the fights that it gave you those Diego Lopez vibes, and I couldn't agree more. When this fight, I think it was post our predictions, so we didn't predict this fight. I think he was still fighting Haddon at the time, who we also were like, this is a good prospect that Wellmaker's fighting on short notice as well. Firstly, I just want to open up a kind of feel for Wellmaker. Like, you get a guy, you're supposed to fight Sydney at the beginning, and then he's out. So then you get a short notice fight against a up and coming prospect in Cody Haddon. And then that fight gets canceled. Now you got this new guy Ewing coming in. You probably don't know much about him. It's harder to game plan. It's a lot of stress on your team. And then he goes out there, and obviously you could tell that Ewing had answers for stuff that Wellmaker didn't. He was taking him down. He was mixing in the takedown attempts, the control, and like you said, Rye, in the pocket, it seemed like they were both throwing this whole fight. And props to Ewing for standing in there at the end, probably winning in rounds. It probably maybe was 1-1 going into the third. But yeah, tit for tat. Every time he got hit, he seemed to be hitting harder back. Definitely the boogeyman. And props to a guy like in sports. I know, we talk about it in everything: football, baseball, basketball, fighting. You get one opportunity sometimes in life, and if you don't make the most of it, you might never get that opportunity again. And this seemed just like that's what Ewing had in his mind. He was like, if I don't win this fight, I might never make the roster again. I think he was fighting Uriah Faber's promotion, the last fight he had. So not like a contender series fight that he lost and he's still on the radar. So this was huge. I mean, like you touched on, I don't know what's next for Wellmaker, but I think Ewing's going to be a guy that he showed that he's very well rounded. He's going to be around for a while. I think he could fight at the 10 to 15 rankings coming soon, maybe his next 3 or 4 fights. And he's still young. I think he's 27 or 28. So this is a guy to watch out for. He's going to be someone we talk about a lot in the coming years.
Yeah, I mean, you guys hit on everything. Very exciting stuff from Ethyn Ewing. He definitely had an answer for everything. Luke, I do like that you mentioned, the difficulty that Wellmaker and his team probably had adjusting to all those, fighter changes and short notice fighters. Everybody talks about how difficult it is to come in on short notice and fight a guy that's as difficult as Wellmaker is. It's, getting first round knockouts and things like that. But nobody really seems to mention how difficult it is for a fighter having his opponent change a bunch of times, when he's ready. It happened to Charles Oliveira. We kind of talked about it a little bit there. That's kind of where this conversation started. He's training for a striker, a very, voluminous striker that's going to throw a bunch of strikes per minute. And then you're going to a guy that like Gamrot, that's a wrestler. So I do think there's an interesting conversation to be had there when, you're sitting there waiting for your opponent and he keeps changing. And this time it changed 3 times. And there's just too much uncertainty there for a guy like Wellmaker to go out and try and get that first round knockout. In my eyes, I think that's kind of what happened is, you just have no idea who this other guy across the octagon is from you, or what he's got going on. So if you guys don't have anything there, I think there is.
I want to add one thing, Son. I definitely I want to call this out because like Islam with Moicano, it shows the levels. Like those guys who could fight anyone on any given day, or like bring them to me, whoever you have out there, I'll beat. Those are the champions. The guys like this. Not saying that Wellmaker's not. He could bounce back. He's still young in his UFC career. But we see when those changes happen, it doesn't allow you the time to prep, like you touched on, and we're seeing those guys lose. But like when we see those guys like Charles Oliveira, Islam, doesn't matter. Roll them out. We're going to beat them. And I think that's definitely a difference between a champ and just a guy in the ranking. So definitely wanted to call that out.
Yeah, for sure. So before actually we get into this card this weekend, there was one other thing we wanted to talk about. And that is the fight outside of the octagon. It was Dillon Danis versus 40 Dagestani dudes out in the crowds. It got pretty crazy. Basically, from what I understand and what the reports I was reading was Dillon Danis was by himself, shows this group of Dagestani guys this AI-generated video of Ali Abdelaziz kissing fucking Islam or Khabib. And obviously, they're very religious guys. They're, not going to really take that, video of 2 dudes kissing very lightly. And then Dillon Danis gets his ass beat by John Pork and the other Dagestani guys. in the middle of MSG, which makes it way better. Like probably the most prestigious arena in the world, if not, one of them. And you got two guys fighting over two dudes kissing. That was AI generated. So, Ryan, kick us off here. What do you think? What comes to that? I know Dana White obviously said that, Dylan Dennis is not going to be allowed in any more UFC events. I don't know why he was after that, Conor McGregor Khabib fight anyways. But what do you make of that, man? I mean, what's going on?
I mean, the balls on that guy, eh? Like, that's some pretty ballsy shit to do exactly to do what he did. Take some serious cojones, especially being by yourself. And it's just also kind of funny to think that's not even the first time he's been jumped by a bunch of Dagestanis in a UFC arena. Notoriously, he's Conor McGregor's BJJ coach. So when him and Khabib fought, Khabib jumped the cage after he submitted Conor to go kill Dylan Dennis. So obviously there was already bad blood there, from that stemming even about 6, 7, 8 years ago now, from whenever that fight took place. And I don't know, man. I mean, I guess, he did instigate it. I still feel kind of crazy to ban him from all UFC events. I don't know if that's like the craziest thing to do, considering he also did get jumped by like the entire Muslim Brotherhood. It's not okay to jump people either. But I don't know, man. This is what Dylan Dennis does. That's what he's known for. He starts trouble, builds a name for himself, and I'm sure he'll have a fight booked with someone soon in whatever Misfits promotion, right? It's like that's what it is. He's like the champion of Misfits now. Yeah. So I'm sure this is just to get his name out there, and in probably 2 weeks' time, he'll have a fight booked with some dude off the Russian mountain for that strap.
I will say, I think it's you did bring up a good point. I mean, it is interesting that Dylan Dennis is the guy that gets in trouble for this, and not all the contractually signed guys by the UFC. I mean, some random guy shows up in the. I mean, just think about the situation. You got one guy sitting by himself, using his freedom of speech in America, which Dana White's obviously a very patriotic guy. It's kind of backwards in a sense. You get one guy that's kind of fucking with other people, using his words and videos and whatever, and then he gets jumped and he's the one that gets banned. I mean, do you think that's fair, Luke? Do you think the right decision was made, or you think it's probably just preventing what might possibly happen in the future?
Yeah, it's hard because I feel like the Dagestanis kind of have a chokehold on the UFC right now. They have a lot of influence. Khabib, Islam, Ali represents just about every fighter out of Russia. So I feel that Dana's making a very political move right now, but it's still early. We could see something come down the line. And also, John Pork I think he fought in Contender Series.
So he's contract.
Like he's in the UFC too, and he's the one that was, the main culprit of beating Dylan Dennis's ass. So I think right now it's too early to really see what happens. But Ryan, Dylan Dennis, I don't know if you guys heard stories, like he's the king of New York. Apparently, like when people show up that he doesn't like people pull up on him. Like the guy that Dylan Dennis doesn't like he has a lot of influence. And I think Dana said this, or maybe, they got to check in with Dylan Dennis before coming to New York, which I know maybe that's a joke online, but every time it seems to be true. Like something happens when people who are not on good terms with Dylan Dennis show up in New York. So he definitely has some pull. And then I heard, I don't know if it was Dana or Masvidal, because Masvidal has problems with Dylan Dennis as well and was going to beat him up. Apparently that's what he said. But apparently Dylan was not sitting in his seat. He was just walking around all the fighters. And Dana was like, what am I supposed to do? I can't kick him out. He bought a seat. I didn't know he was alone. That's pretty crazy that he was alone, and then went into all the Dagestanis and showed that video. So like you said, right, the ball's on that guy. He knows how to promote himself and stands on business, like you said, 10 years post the Conor McGregor Khabib fight. Still beefing with those guys. It's for life, like Khabib said. Sees McGregor in the street, they're fighting. So I think I know it sucks and it's bad for the promotion or professional promotion, but we're talking about it here on Tuesday night, 3 days after the fight. So it definitely has an influence on the MMA world. And it's just funny, man. It's just funny.
Yeah, no, it's great too, because it reminds me, when that whole Conor and Khabib camp fought, when they fought when they fought back, 10 years ago now, Islam Makhachev, having just recently been signed, and I think maybe even coming off his only loss in the UFC, was the guy that jumped into the cage and sucker punched McGregor and got arrested. And in that post-fight press conference, Dana White said, you know, at the time it sounded very serious that Islam Makhachev will never fight, you know, in the UFC ever again for the rest of his life. And the guy just became a double champ. So who the fuck knows what's going to happen with Dylan Dennis?
Yeah, it's a good point. I would say, you know, bring him in the UFC and let him fight some people and, you know, blow some steam off. But
Let him fight John Pork.
yeah, I just don't see it happening. I mean, it's too much of a risk for his personal brand. I mean, he makes his whole brand on shitting on people. If he loses to some bum, you know, not even in the rankings on you know, by some fluke way or something, you know, it kind of just crushes everything he's built. So I don't think that'll ever happen. But I would love to see him come to UFC at some point. You know, there's still hope. He's fighting, you know, misfits, a very legitimate promotion in fighting. So as we all know. But if we're done with that, we can get right back into UFC fights in the Octagon with UFC Qatar this weekend. We got the main event, Tsarukyan versus Dan Hooker, but we'll start off at the bottom of this main card with Tagir Ulanbekov versus Kyoji Horiguchi. Ryan, I'll let you do the honors here. What is your pick? What do you make of this fight? And yeah,
man,
let's hear it.
It's more of like Kyoji Horiguchi is, I think, more of just like a symbolic figure now, coming back into the UFC at 35 years old. You know, people might remember him. He fought Demetrius Johnson back in 2015. He was the guy that lost with 1 second left via armbar, a record that wasn't tied again until Max Holloway knocked out Justin Gaethje at UFC 300 last year in April. So the guy's had a long run. You know, he got dropped from the UFC, bounced around promotions like Ryzen, One, Bellator, the whole nine. And I think this is kind of like his like coming home for retirement ceremony. Hasn't really necessarily been the greatest when it comes to dealing with like high pressure grapplers, especially at that Dagestani type level grappling. And that's exactly what Tagir Ulanbekov brings to the table in this fight. I don't think this should pose much of a threat for Tagir. And I have him winning this one by decision. Maybe if he goes for it, he could probably even get this one done by sub. Should be a pretty comfortable night in the Octagon for Tagir here.
Yeah, right. I know we talked about this before we started filming. I had my order messed up, so I didn't do too much research into this fight. I don't have much to add. I think I just look at the records here. Tagir, I think he's 4-5 in the UFC in his last 5, and the loss was to Tim Elliott, who we saw put on a great performance a couple of months ago. I think you really hit on it. Just the recency of fighting the top MMA guys at the highest promotion is really where I'm just siding with. I got Tagir here. I think he has the avenue and the experience right now to win this fight, and I think he gets it done. I do give props to the UFC for letting Horiguchi come back and kind of ride off into the sunset. I just don't think they gave him too favorable of a matchup here. So I think decision is the way it goes. You know, especially at this weight class. But I got Tagir here.
Yeah, I mean, nothing too much to add. I did just want to say, I mean, Kyoji, sorry, has been fighting at a high level for so long, and I think we've talked about this before. We've mentioned it before. The wear and tear you get from that. I mean, even if you're not in the UFC, if you're just fighting for, you know, 10, 15 years at the highest level possible. You know, he was in the UFC fighting Demetrius Johnson back in 2015. So, you know, he was in the UFC for a long time. Then he left, which, you know, shortly after that DJ loss to go, you know, to Japan and bounce around everywhere else. So it really just takes a toll on your body. So I just don't see him being able to hold up in that cage. That's what I'm seeing as the issue going into this fight. And he's just gone through so much wear and tear. You know, a ranked 11 Tagir Ulanbekov is, you know, primed to be able to pull him apart. So moving on, we got Sergey Spivak, ranked number 7, fighting against the legend Shamil Gaziev. Luke, take us away here. Who do you got winning?
Yeah, I got Gaziev here. I think this is a great matchup for him. You got Spivak, who obviously dropped his last 2, but against really high-level competition, Jailton Almeida and then WCA. So those are top guys in the promotion, especially at the heavyweight weight class. But I think Spivak's, you know, we've seen it a lot. His MO is grappling, and I think Gaziev has the answers. He's a really good defensive grappler. He obviously isn't going to do much when they get it down to the ground, but he does have great takedown defense. So I see this fight staying on the feet most of the fight, and I think Gaziev has all the striking advantages that you could have in a fight here. I think this is lined up perfectly for him to score a knockout here, and that's the way I'm riding. I got Gaziev by knockout.
Yeah, Luke, I agree with you, unfortunately. the exact same thing. I think I don't think Spivak's is gonna be able to get this one to the ground, and then once it comes into a standing matchup, you got Shamil the Blob Gaziev there just to knock you out cold, which is insane to me because you remember this guy, he gassed out in between rounds like 4 and 5 when he fought Jazeer Rosenstrike, and almost had a fucking heart attack. World caliber athlete, by the way. Just saying. And
It's a heavyweight.
Yeah, heavyweights go 5 rounds all the fucking time.
He's the Prince Fielder of UFC.
Yeah. So he was like the one that kind of opened my eyes to the sorry state that is the heavyweight division. Because after that, he knocked out Thomas Peterson, who was unranked. And then when I woke up on Tuesday morning after that card, he was casually ranked number 14. I don't know if that's changed. I really don't think it has. But now he's fighting number 7. He's probably going to knock out number 7. Not too many answers on the feet that Spivak will have for Shamil. He is a pretty competent striker. I will give him that. And it's just crazy to think that he might be fighting Tom Aspinall in a fight after this. It's absolutely insane to me. But I do have Shamil Gaziev by knockout. I don't like the guy. Fuck.
Yeah. I mean, I'm surprised you guys went with Shamil Gaziev here. You guys have, your reasons to back it up. I was on Shamil Gaziev because it's fucking hilarious, and I think it'd be great if he won. He's been a meme in the UFC since he joined. I mean, nobody really ever had high expectations for him. He looks like shit. He fights pretty well though, and I think this is just a really good this is a really good matchup for him. I mean, Sergey Spivak, obviously, like you guys mentioned. I mean, good luck taking down Shamil. And if you can't take him down, you're going to be on the feet. And I think that's where Spivak has found his trouble, historically speaking. So I got Shamil Gaziev. Let's see if that knockout happens. I would love for it to happen. And yeah, it is crazy to think about. I mean, he's getting really close to that title fight. And I remember when he first got in the UFC, people on, MMA Instagram and MMA Twitter were all, ironically calling him the next heavyweight champion. And now, for whatever reason, it's not so far out of reach. So we'll see what happens there. I'm hoping he wins. I actually love the guy. I might have talked a little bit down on him just now, but I think he's great. I think it's hilarious, and I think it's good for the sport. So moving on, we have a welterweight bout between Jack Hermansson versus Myktybek Orolbai, the Mongolian Kyrgyzstanian legend. 2 legends back-to-back fighting here. Ryan, what do you got for us on this one?
Yeah, honestly, I was surprised to see Jack Hermansson fight again this year, let alone, this year, yeah, especially on this shortly after his last bout against Gregory Rodriguez, where he, had one of the worst probably follow-up shot knockouts I've ever seen. Took a lot of damage in his last fight. I was also surprised to see Myktybek Orolbai make the decision to move up. I thought he was a pretty, decent contender for the lightweight division. I know his fight with Rebecca didn't go his way. He lost that to split decision, but he bounced back pretty well on that Azerbaijan card. Had a pretty dominant win, ended up getting the Kimura sub finish in the second round, I believe. But I think it goes the same way. Jack Hermansson's a pretty solid grappler, but Myktybek Orolbai puts on a pace. He'll put on a pace for you for the entire 15 minutes of that fight, and I think he does the same thing to Jack Hermansson. He's also only 27 years old. Jack Hermansson's 37, coming off the worst KO loss of his career. And I think this one's just too soon of a turnaround for him. We've seen that before in the past. And I'm not saying that Myktybek Orolbai is going to knock him out by any means, but I don't think Jack's going to look like himself in there, especially when he has to cut more weight and drain himself even more going down to 170. Historically, he's a middleweight fighter. So who knows how he's going to be dealing with those shots. I have Myktybek Orolbai winning this one pretty comfortably. I think it's just going to be a dominant grappling performance from Myktybek.
Yeah, Ryan, I'm glad you hit the last part. Jack Hermansson, I didn't click on every fight in his Tapology record, but I didn't see a single one that he fought at 170. Everyone is at 185, and he's 37 years old and now going to cut down 15 pounds. And he's not like carrying a lot of weight when he fights at 185. He's ripped. So I'm very, very, very surprised that at this point in his career at 37, like you touched on, 4 months after getting knocked out, is deciding to cut down to 170. It's not a 10-pound cut. This is a 15-pound cut. It's significant. And I think the stamina is not going to be there, especially at this age, cutting that much weight. I mean, obviously it's a little nuanced, but like we saw with Alex Pereira when he was fighting at 185, sucked out, got knocked out by Izzy, we haven't seen him really get even really close to getting knocked out up in the weight at 205. So I think that's something to note. Also, Orolbai fought his last fight at 165. I can't remember exactly if he missed weight or if his opponent missed weight, but I think it's clear that he was, like you said, he was a contender at 155, like not a contender, but getting in the rankings, fighting right outside the rankings, a name to keep our eye on. But I think maybe he had some struggles making the weight. So I think this is a good move up for him. And obviously, it's been the note at the first part of the recap, moving up and down weights that we touched on in UFC 322. But I just think the angle here for Hermansson going down is just going to be too much. And I would not be surprised if he comes in overweight. This is like not a insignificant weight cut. This is a big weight cut for a guy later in his career coming off a knockout. I just can't put my eggs in that basket. So I'm going Orolbai. I think he gets it done by decision. I think Hermansson's a veteran in the sport. I think he finds a way to weather the storm and still be there after the end of round 3. But I just don't think he'll have the stamina to compete in the later rounds.
Yeah, I'm super happy you guys both brought it up. I'm going to go ahead and put a missed weight alert on this fight on either side of this one. I think Jack Hermansson is going to have a very tough time cutting down. A lot of fighters talk about the whole weight cut thing, and the one thing that they mentioned is at some point, for whatever reason, sometimes your water loading didn't go right, or your diet's not going right, and you're in that sauna trying to cut weight, and your body just shuts that down. You stop sweating fully, you stop losing weight, and you're just sitting in that hot sauna for no reason. The sweat starts to dry, and there's just nothing left to give. So I do think that's a very high possibility here. And with that said, I got to go with the younger guy that's going to be in a healthier state this weekend. That's going to not have such a tough time with the weight cut. Hopefully both these guys make weight. If I can also see both these guys missing weight. But I think Myktybek got it. And like you guys say, I think decision's the right call here. I think Jack Hermansson, especially if he does come in a little bit heavy, will be able to, survive the storm that is Orolbai. So if we don't have anything to add there, we got a ranked light heavyweight bout between Volkan Oezdemir coming in at minus 225 against Alonzo Menifield at plus 185. Ryan, what do you make of this one? Who do you think wins?
Yeah, man, I got Volkan by KO coming in here. I think we've seen it. This is the type of, like, not the credit to Alonzo Menifield. He's seen it all, but see his last couple of wins. Umar Sy, he was I think the guy was 11-0, but hadn't really been tested. Fought the crafty vet in Alonzo Menifield. Alonzo was able to put him out there. Johnny Walker's split decision. Impressive win, but still Johnny Walker's been very up and down in his career. And then when you look at and then KO's Demirzakhanov and Carlos Ulberg, when you look at Volkan Oezdemir and what he's been able to do, he lost his last fight by decision to Carlos Ulberg, but then bounced back. KO's Johnny Walker in round 1, subs Bogdan Guskov, beats Paul Craig, Nikita Krylov. He has a loss to Nikita Krylov, Yuri Prohaska. I think Volkan, just in these moments when he fights guys who fight to his styles, such as like Alonzo Menifield will do, he usually finds a way to put them out. And I don't see this fight being a big issue for Volkan here.
Yeah, right. I'm with you too. I'm on Volkan here. Alonzo Menifield is just kind of one of those guys I feel like I can never get right. I remember after the Jimmy Crute fight, the decision, that the draw decision, I was like, Crute's going to get the second one, and then Menifield won the fight after. Then I was on Dustin Jacoby. He beats him. And then obviously he goes up and fights Carlos Ulberg, who is probably going to get the next title shot. Or maybe there's Yuri in there too. But I think you just look at the same fact pattern for Volkan. Like you touch on, lost to Ulberg, aged very well. Krylov is kind of a iffy one, but still a top contender at that weight class. Then Ankalaev and Yuri are his 2 losses before that. It seems like he beats the guys that he should beat and never loses to the guys that he never loses to guys that you're like, oh, he shouldn't have lost that fight. He's always getting it done when we think he should get it done. I think Volkan is in a perfect spot here. I think Menifield has kind of a pressure, unorthodox striking style where it's kind of unpredictable, but Volkan just holds the upper hand in technical striking. And I think that's going to show. I think he's going to weather the storm early, and we're going to be like, oh, God, sit in our seats like maybe Alonzo gets it done again. But then Volkan's going to show his veteranship and his ability to weather the storm and technicality is going to trump all here. I think he gets it done by knockout as well.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I like that, you guys brought up that Olberg fight, because that is one that I called for Volkan Oezdemir to win. I have never been too high on Olberg. Obviously, he's kind of earned his place, and I respect that now. But I did think at that point that Volkan Oezdemir did have enough to take him down. And with that said, Alonzo Menifield is not an impressive win on most people's record. I know we've mentioned it before, with other fighters in this division. When we see a win by Alonzo Menifield, we just kind of skip over it. It almost doesn't hold too much weight. So I think this should be an easy finish for Volkan Oezdemir. And I'll make that a clean sweep. I mean, Volkan by KO, I think all three of us got it. Now, getting into the really exciting fights of the night, if it doesn't go to decision, which maybe it will. We got a number 2 ranked Belal Muhammad, former champion, going up against one of the soon-to-be title contenders, if he wins this one, Ian Machado Garry, ranked number 6. Ryan, give me your thoughts.
Yeah, man, this is a tough one, because I just don't know how, or at least when I was looking at it, I really just can't predict how well Ian Garry's going to do with the grappling pressure of Belal Muhammad. But I feel like every time, I pick against Ian Garry, he ends up proving me wrong. So I'm just going to bite my tongue on this one. I'm going to go Ian Garry. I think, we've seen this guy evolve every single time he steps into an octagon. He took on Carlos Prates on short notice and was able to showcase his grappling ability against a dangerous guy like Carlos Prates and stay out of trouble for the most part, like we said, up until that 5th round. But for 20 minutes of that fight, he was pretty much dominating. And Belal didn't look the best against JDM when they fought in their last fight for the title. He was able to get outworked, and I think Ian Garry is still that hungry newcomer on the rise. He knows he's one fight away. He's been game planning for guys like this, like guys like Kamaru Usman. He knows that division's stacked with grapplers, and I know that he has his eyes set on the title, so I think he's been working a lot of that into his game plan well before this fight got booked with Belal. I think Bilal's been on his radar for a long time, and I think he gets him done. I think he gets it done. Whether it's by decision, I think it's probably will be by decision, considering it's just a 15-minute fight, 3 rounds. If this was a 5-round fight, I'd have Ian Garry by knockout, but I think he gets this one done by decision. I think he's able to get back up to his feet if he does get taken down, stay at range, and pick him apart on the feet.
Yeah, right. I like that you touched on kind of the takedown defense and Belal and JDM. I think that's kind of what led us to all pick JDM in that fight against Islam, because we saw the scramble ability, the ability to get taken down against Belal and get back up rather quickly. And maybe that shows how good JDM was prepared for that fight, or maybe we're kind of gassing up the ability of Belal to take down and hold people down. In my head, I don't think Ian Garry's a worse grappler than JDM. Honestly, I think he might be better, and we've seen the offensive wrestling in the fights that he needs to do that to win come out to play. And I think if Belal does, and I think he probably will get some takedowns, I could clearly see Ian Garry being able to get up. Obviously, he kind of takes like a Brazilian as his second home now. Brazil is his second home, training with those guys, and obviously marrying a girl with the last name Machado and from Brazil, and he even put in his last name, so he has a lot of pride in that. But I think not only that, but his fighting style has developed into that. He has great takedown defense. We've seen it with Shavkat. He had the offensive position at the end of that fight against Shavkat. So I don't think the grappling is going to be a problem for Ian Garry. And I'm just excited. One, it's a 3-round fight, which very much favors Ian Garry. I think in a 5-round fight, I'm thinking about this a lot more. The grappling wears on you later in those rounds, especially the championship rounds. And I think I might give Belal the upper hand, because this is a former champ. He's no slouch. He's been in there with the best of the best and beaten the best of the best. But I think because of this being a 3-round fight, it's a chance that we haven't seen in a couple of fights for Ian Machado Garry to really showcase how good of a kickboxer he is. I think people forget that he came into the UFC as like this legit kickboxing background style fighter, that he's going to be the next. I know there's some comparisons to Izzy in his style, and we haven't really seen that. I mean, Michael Venom Page, he took it to the ground. Carlos Prates, he did strike a little bit, but he was focused on getting it to the ground in his grappling. So I'm very excited to see. I think Ian Garry could very much stay at range this whole fight, be able to dance around the octagon and pick Belal apart. And with it only being 3 rounds, I think it's just going to be too much. Like you said, he's just going to be able to outwork Belal here. And I got Ian Machado Garry winning this fight. And I think we're having the same conversation we just had with Michael Morales and Carlos Prates of Ian Machado Garry could easily get this next shot for the title here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you guys said. I personally hate every single thing about Ian Machado Garry outside of the octagon, but what I do see in the octagon is extremely impressive. I mean, you can hate on the guy all you want as far as personality goes. I know, I've always thought he's a huge cornball, but you can't deny how great he is in that octagon. You can't deny how good he is when he's fighting for the UFC. What came to mind when this fight came up was his fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov. That's a fight that I personally expected Shavkat to win by finish. I thought he could get him by submission. I thought he could get him even by knockout. And it didn't happen. So I think this Belal Muhammad fight is going to be, maybe not as similar in the way that, Shavkat kind of held him down or held him up against the cage the whole fight. I don't think Belal is going to try to do that, and maybe he might, but I don't know if he'll be successful in doing that. But I think that fight was kind of just the first stepping stone of getting to this Belal fight, because I don't think Ian Garry is going to see anything this weekend that he hasn't seen, especially within that Shavkat fight. And I think you guys are absolutely right. I think Ian Garry's getting ready to, tee off this weekend, put some shots on somebody that he really doesn't like. Most fighters in the UFC despise Belal Muhammad unless they're a part of that Ali Abdelaziz group. But but I'm excited to see what he does. I could see him winning by finish this weekend, and we'll see what happens. But I hate to say it, but Ian Machado Garry has really worked into his spot in the UFC, and I think he's in a money spot to go for that title soon. And without further ado, we have, in my opinion, a very strange fight that I think is slightly one-sided. But the main event of UFC Qatar, we have the #1 ranked Arman Tsarukyan finally getting back in the cage. I think it's been 2 years, maybe I'm wrong, but it's been damn close to 2 years, against Dan Hooker, who has been making a killing recently. Ranked #6 versus the ranked #1. Luke, what do you got for us here?
Yeah, I like how you introduce this as a very one-sided. I think this is as one-sided as it gets. I got Arman here. I don't see how he doesn't get this one done. I know Dan Hooker is a good grappler, defensive grappler, and he's been able to withstand some storms in the past. I think this is too big of a pill to swallow, per se. Arman should have got the title. I mean, he had the title shot, and then obviously he got in the UFC's bad graces with the bad weight cut, the back injury, whatever happened, where he bounced out of that 155 championship belt, and Moicano stepped up. But he's still that guy. He's been training with Khamzat in that whole camp, only getting better with the guys that are the best in the world. And I see him walking through Dan Hooker. And with that being said, I'm a huge Dan Hooker fan. I've been calling for a Max Holloway-Dan Hooker fight, I feel like, for the last year. I just think stylistically this does not favor Dan Hooker at all. But at the same, flip side of the coin, we've been saying that in a couple of last Dan Hooker fights where he's been able to get his hand raised and just dig deep and do what he's done his whole UFC career and be there at the later rounds and being able to find a finish. I just think Arman could get this fight wherever he wants. He has the ability to submit him. I don't think he'll submit him, but I think also we're going to see Arman showcase his striking a little bit here, because I don't think he's too scared of getting knocked out by Dan Hooker in this fight. But I do see the avenue of victory being takedown, ground and pound. People forget Arman's got a great full guard where he really lands the elbows. And now with the 12-6, I don't think he's fought since 12-6 been legal. So I see him getting it done, ground and pound TKO. And hopefully we see Dan Hooker fight soon. Obviously, he's had a lot of injuries. UFC is always better when he's in the octagon.
Yeah, I like how you touched on the fact that the UFC definitely is always better when Dan Hooker's in the octagon. Now, should Arman win this fight? Probably. Better grappler? Yeah. Better striker? Maybe. Grittier? No. Who's less of a coward? Probably Dan Hooker. I've been enthralled with the title redemption title run that is Dan Hooker, because it's only been Claudio Puelles, Jalen Turner, and Mateusz Gamrot, and now he's 6 fighting the #1 ranked guy in the lightweight division. I'm assuming San's gonna go with Arman Tsarukyan. and I don't want this to be another clean sweep on the pod, so I will be going with Dan Hooker. I think he gets this one done. I think, we've seen throughout the most of his career is where he just bites down on the mouthpiece and just, gets down to business. He'll just in terms of getting gritty, he'll out gritty you. And that's just it. Mama didn't raise a quitter in Dan Hooker. God didn't put the quit in him when he created him. He'll weather the storm. He'll come back. He'll make every round close, and he'll probably take home a split decision because Dana White and the UFC hate Arman Tsarukyan. They'd rather see Dan Hooker die to Ilia Topuria right hand than Arman Tsarukyan maybe get that title off of Ilia Topuria. If there's anyone in the UFC right now in that division that has a chance to do it, it is Arman Tsarukyan. He is that talented. He is that guy. And with that being said, I just know the UFC wants Dan Hooker to win this weekend. I'm going with the UFC, and I'm going with Dan Hooker.
Yeah, I mean, bold prediction, and I can't say I disagree fully. I mean, I love Dan Hooker. I love what he's been doing the past few fights. I think I want Dan Hooker to win this weekend, but I just can't see it happening, unfortunately. I mean, if you ask me two different questions, who do I want to win? It's Dan Hooker. I want Dan Hooker to win this weekend. I absolutely agree with you. I think the UFC would love if Dan Hooker won, gets, Tsarukyan a little bit off that pedestal he's been on, and, get a super exciting guy that everybody would love to see fight for a title and probably die to Ilia Topuria in his next fight. Now, let's talk realism here in realistic situations. I mean, Tsarukyan's a damn good striker. Is he better than Dan Hooker? That's up to debate. I guess we'll find out this weekend. But one thing he does have a clear advantage of is the wrestling, especially being in that Khamzat camp. That's the one thing that he's going to be training the most. That's the one thing he's going to be riding up his title for. If he fights, whenever his fight with Ilia Topuria happens, I think that's exactly what he goes to, is he defaults to that wrestling as soon as he can, because obviously Ilia is an absolute demon on the feet. And so I think that's how it goes this weekend. I think Tsarukyan gets a little wrestling warm-up this weekend. You're going to be seeing a lot of submission attempts. You're going to be seeing a lot of scrambles. And maybe you might just see Tsarukyan standing on top of him, ground and pounding him. I would love to see Dan Hooker win this weekend. Do not get me wrong. I just can't see it happening. I think Tsarukyan's too much of a specimen. I saw what he did to slightly coming out of his prime Charles Oliveira. Arguably lost that fight, up to debate. But he's just great, man. And I think you guys are right. I mean, he's the only guy I see right now that has the closest chance to beat Ilia Topuria. So I'm gonna side on the I'm gonna err on the side of minus 575 odds for Arman Tsarukyan here. If I'm wrong, I'll be very happy. I would love to see Dan win this weekend, but minus almost 600 is tough, especially, a number 1 ranked versus a number 6 ranked. It kind of shows the discrepancy we're seeing in that division right now.
Hungry dogs run faster.
I agree. I mean, Dan Hooker is fucking starving, man. He deserves it out of all people. I mean, I think I would love to see him win that, man. Nothing would make my Saturday better. And I hope on Sunday or Monday or whenever we film our recap next week, Ryan, you got your hand raised with alongside Dan Hooker there.
One thing I want to touch on before I don't even know how I got across this on Sunday night, but there's 2 guys on this card fighting out of Paddy Pimblett's camp, and one of them, this Luke Riley kid out of England, he's 26 years old. So I just want to call that out as someone to look out for. He's fighting the prelims. He's a minus 265 favorite, but apparently he is a dog. So very much looking forward to that. That's all I got to say. I want to give a shout out.
Bogdangrad, that's going to be a very tough fight for him. Let's see what we can do. There's also, I just realized, there's a dude named Shamrock in this fight. No picture. I'm just looking at UFC website right now. He's fighting Narulo Aliev versus Shamrock. And no picture, no country. We don't even know where this guy came from. So we'll see. We'll see what happens this weekend. But unless you guys have anything to add, do you?
Oh,
all right. I think we're set. That wraps it up for tonight. Thank you guys for joining us. If you guys like me better as a host, make sure to tell Zach that in the comments. I'll be a way better host any day of the week. But we're excited for next week, for the next film session, have Zach back on with us. So appreciate it, guys. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.